Call to order the special called school board meeting of June 25th, 2018. Madam Clerk, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sturtevant?
Present.
Mrs. Bailey?
Present.
Mr. Palmer?
Present.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Present.
Mr. Campbell?
Present.
Mrs. Garner?
Present.
Mr. Johnson is not here. Mr. Edwards?
Present.
Mr. Ritchie?
Present. May I have may I have a motion that the board adopts tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Ms. Bailey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, members of the board and Mr. Ritchie. One thing I'd like to point out tonight to members as well as to the public is that we have two sections of action items, unlike usual. The first is because of several things that we need to take care of that can be taken care of as usual. But there are two items. One is a disciplinary issue and another related to personnel that will come after the closed meeting. And the closed meeting could be lengthy, so we put that after the closed meeting. And if there are no questions about that, then we will go ahead and move forward with Ms. Peffer giving us information on the request for supplemental appropriations.
Good evening, Mr. Chairperson, School Board, Mr. Nichols. The first request I have is a request to close out the fiscal year 18 budget. I need to ask for your permission to ask the Board of Supervisors for a supplemental appropriation to food services for unallocated revenue that came in the amount of $200,403.36. And I need to ask your permission to request a budget transfer from instruction to federal to cover federal instructional costs that we have not received reimbursements for yet. Any questions?
What was the second item? What was the second?
A budget transfer from instruction to federal
That's fine.
What was that for?
to cover federal instructional costs that we haven't received reimbursement for.
And what was the total of that?
$94,063.90.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pfeffer, will that be coming in?
Yes, it will be coming in. What happened was we carry over June and July payroll for federal. Last year, the June and July federal did not have the 4.4% increase in it, so it does not cover the whole cost of the July and August, June and July carryover this year. So they will be requested, we request the reimbursements in June and July for the carryover. So it will be coming in, it just won't be coming in time. Because we have to wait for the paychecks to be sent out before we request that reimbursement.
Understand.
Any questions?
Is that a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Mr. Chairman, the Finance Committee has not met since our last general meeting, so we have not made a recommendation. We talked about it a little bit at our last Finance Committee meeting. The numbers were not final at that point.
Correct.
So that's why we did not make any recommendation there. But it's a timing issue, not so much as it is a budgetary issue.
Correct.
And I kind of fall short of making a committee recommendation because the committee's not discussed it. So
But the federal-
any other committee members that would like to add something, they're welcome to do so.
Is the federal money, that federal money's coming? Is that what-
Yes, that federal money comes in June
All
and
right.
July.
Okay.
June carryover comes in July. July carryover comes in August.
And that's for salaries?
Salaries for federal
All
instructional
right,
people.
so we need to go ahead and pay our people, then get reimbursed?
Correct. And we have the money and instruction to do it.
And after the money comes in federal, it's going to be transferred back to instruction?
No,
It's not?
no, it stays in federal. because we're moving money down into federal.
Oh,
Uh,
do we have and I'm not questioning your ability, but are we allowed to transfer between categories? I didn't think we were.
Yes, I talked to Wayne today, Mr. Carter today, and that's how he told me to do it. He says this happens all the time with federal money. He didn't see a problem with it, and all I had to do was get your permission to ask for a budget transfer.
If the king said so.
Yeah. And the food, let's see, the food service request for, but not inappropriate.
I ask for that almost every year due to, and most of the money comes in for the federal meals.
Okay.
And we don't know how much we get each year. We estimate,
Right,
and we usually estimate on the lower end, and we usually get more revenue in than what we estimate.
all right. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
So I assume, Ms. Pfeffer, again, this is to close out the fiscal year. This is what we need to move forward with.
Yes.
Okay.
We cannot end with a negative category.
Okay. So, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve these requests from the Finance Department.
All right,
That's going to be an action item.
all right, right. That's all right. All right, so no more questions for Ms. Pfeffer? We'll go to the fuel bid.
The fuel bid came in today. They opened the bids in Farmville, and James River Solutions is the lowest bid on fuel prices. We'll see a small increase in unleaded fuel, about 35 cents. But James River is the lowest bid.
35 cents a gallon?
No,
Oh.
just an increase. It's 197.
Okay. All right, any other questions on the fuel bid? Let's see. All right, are you also presenting the end-of-year bills, Ms. Pfeffer, or is that
If you
somebody
have
else?
any questions, yes.
The end of the monthly bills are typically one of those things that the Finance Committee takes care of, and they simply go through and look at the various bills to see if there's any questions about them before you approve them. So rather than the committee do it this month, as we're having a special meeting, they're available for all members to be able to have any questions of. And this is posted on the bill sheet or on the board docs.
Right. So if anybody wants to take a few minutes and look down through those.
Yes.
I have no questions.
We're going to be sending back a board doc around.
questions either from the finance part of it, any part of it.
We have spent everything we can this year. Given it's because of the teacher shortage, that's why we did.
All right. So is everybody happy with that? We will move to our action items. In reference to the South Hill Elementary School surplus, may I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that,
Sorry, the school board deems the televisions and
Oh.
corresponding items as surplus. I've lost the screen there.
So moved.
second,
I have a motion from Mr. Sturtevant, seconded by Mr. Honeycutt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer? Mr. Honeycutt?
yes.
Mr. Campbell? Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. In reference to the school day, did anybody have a motion that the school board approves the decrease in the instructional day by 20 minutes at the end of the day for students starting in the 2018-2019 school year?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about that for anybody that wasn't here?
And again, I have a quick question. So those minutes are going to come off the end of the day, okay? So our day will start at what time?
8:15.
8:15?
8:15 to 3:15.
8
8:15
to 3:15?
To 3:15.
Okay, thank you.
And it-
But it would vary according to elementary and high, would it not?
No, sir, it's the same for both.
Instructional time?
Well,
School day.
not by class.
Okay,
The
school
elementary,
day, but-
right, the school day will be the same length,
Okay,
but that's
but
right,
instructional
because the
time will be
secondary is in blocks,
That's
and
correct.
there, that's
That's why I
correct,
asked the
yes.
question.
And
And
the
then t-
elementary gets to set theirs by what they need to teach.
That is correct.
That is correct.
But the teacher's day is not being shortened. It's
That
just
is
the
correct.
instructional time, so they have more, okay. All right, may I have a motion that the school board approves decreasing the instructional day by 20 minutes at the end of the day for students starting in the, oh, wait, I did get a motion in a second on that. didn't I?
Yes.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Everybody's aware that spring break's first to go if we have a lot of snow, right?
But there's still snow days built into the
Yeah, but I mean,
calendar.
if we go over,
Right, we have, how many days we have built in? We have,
We have, this past year, we had 16 days built in.
right,
With this schedule, we'll have 12 days built in. And there will be room that we could add that time to the end of the day to make up some, because we will have, we will not be going over the amount of time for the aides and the others who are not salaried employees.
wait, I'm good.
all right, who made the motion? Did you get that?
Ms. Garnet, is that Mr.
I have Mrs. Garner made the motion, and Mr. Campbell seconded the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sturtevant?
No.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. May I have a motion that we approve the request for supplemental appropriations?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Mr. Sturtevant. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Abstain.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. May I have a motion that the school board approves the participation in the joint Region 8 fuel bid?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Sturtevant, seconded by Mr. Palmer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Now may I have a motion that the school board approves the payment of the bills?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Mr. Sturtevant. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes, with exception.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. All right, reminders. We have the July 4th holiday, Independence Day on the 4th, of course. On the 5th, offices are closed. On the 16th is the regular school board meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Did you want to change the regular school board meeting for July because of the training?
That's up to the, did we work that out for those going to the training?
I thought we said we would be back, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
In time.
17th, not
No,
on
This is
Monday.
leaving.
That's when we leave.
This is the night before issue, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Meeting is on Tuesday
Oh, okay.
in Richmond.
My bad.
This is Monday night, our Monday night meeting, which some people are going up
It's
the night.
the will of the board, will of the majority.
You can
Bus
go
leaves
back.
at
Move that
6.
we-
Bus leaves at 6.
I move that we have the meeting on Tuesday night instead of Monday night.
I will, discussion. I think that it would be better because to have the meeting and no telling how long it's going to be, and then try and leave here and get to Richmond in a reasonable time, and all of the traffic that you're gonna be, encountering. My suggestion would be the same as Dora. Did you make a motion?
Yeah, I made a
Okay,
motion.
I will second.
That's fine.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is that an issue as far as any scheduling or anything goes?
No, sir.
All of that's
I'm on midnight, so it don't matter.
We'll just need to make sure that we get the proper information to the oh, they're here, never mind, so
All right.
they've heard it.
So that's the, moving the meeting from Monday to Tuesday. So we need to go ahead and vote on that, I guess. I have a,
I would say if you all agree.
or is everyone in agreement of that?
You're gonna have to do the,
But
you're gonna have to do the vote.
We might as well.
We got a motion and a second, so.
Yeah, we got a motion from Ms. Garner. Who seconded that? Mr. Palmer?
For
Yeah,
Tuesday.
can I get a roll call on that? That's changing the meeting from Monday, the 16th, to Tuesday, the 17th?
I have a question.
Sure.
What time is that meeting over in Richmond?
It's typically over
Usually
early
around
afternoon.
1,
1:30.
about 1 or 1:30.
You got time to get back.
Does the finance committee still want to meet at 5, or do you want to meet on the Tuesday, on the Monday before?
No.
Well, I'm not gonna be, I'm coming
Two
in from
nights.
Florida.
Okay.
So can you be here for a 5 o'clock meeting on the 17th?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
No,
All right.
I'm coming in from Florida. I'm coming Florida straight to Richmond.
But you could be here Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
Tuesday, I hope.
July
if I get my
17th at 5
babysitter.
o'clock.
Right, okay. But you plan on it, probably.
Right now I'm planning.
All right. So that'd be moving the business meeting as well, Ms. Giamatti, of,
The finance.
excuse me, the finance
Yeah,
meeting.
5 PM?
And
at
the,
5.
Okay.
to 5 on Tuesday, the 17th, followed by our regular school board meeting at 6 on Tuesday, the 17th. And I have a motion and a second.
All right,
And
could you clarify that again for our papers, please, just to make sure they understand?
You got that, didn't you? Okay. All right.
Could you call it out again, please?
I
If
think
you
watch
just-
it on YouTube.
So if you would just repeat the dates, I just want to make sure, because there was a conflict when Mrs. Bailey said something about the finance, and I want to make sure
Well, the
that we're
finance meeting-
that we're transparent.
Yeah, the finance meeting, of course, is at 5 o'clock, and the meeting is at 6
On July 17th.
on July 17th, which is Tuesday. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
No.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. All right, closed meeting. May I have a motion that the school board convenes a closed meeting for personnel matters? I'm having a tough time tonight. For personnel matters regarding resignations, retirements, supplements, adjustments, employments, grievances, and discipline pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.23711A1, student matters regarding student discipline pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.23711A2, matters regarding the acquisition of real property pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.23711A3, and legal matters regarding possible litigation pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.23711A7.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Garner, seconded by Mr. Palmer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. All righty. Are we going to? All right. May I have a motion that the closed meeting be closed and the board certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting to which this certification applies, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion concerning the closed meetings were heard, discussed, or considered.
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Garner, seconded by Mr. Honeycutt. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Our closed meeting is closed, so I need to open another open session? No?
No.
All right, personnel, we're into our action, back to our action items. First, the personnel agenda.
Make a motion that we accept the personnel agenda as presented.
Still moving.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt that we accept the personnel agenda as recommended, and a second from Mr. Palmer. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Now, in reference to the student matter, may I have a motion that the school board supports the discipline committees? No. May I have a motion that the school board supports the recommendation of the superintendent regarding student discipline matter SD 2017-2018-14 to place a high school student at the Alternative Learning Center for the remainder of of the 2017?
No,
No.
No.
That's not it.
And for the beginning of the?
No.
Mr. Starting back.
My recommendation is that.
Oh, this is, yeah, okay, this is what she typed. So you're, I'm sorry, we have, let's see, a motion, the school board supports the superintendent's recommendation.
Mr. Ritchie?
That's what he had said.
All right.
Yeah, well, this one, just
Tell me to.
support the superintendent's recommendation.
So
And
moved.
not in detail. Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Mr. Sturdivant. Roll call, please.
Ms. Garner.
Was it Ms. Gardner? I
Ms.
heard-
Garner.
oh, Sorry, Ms. Garner. I thought I heard Dan. Yes.
No.
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 Yes.
Abstain. Abstain.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain. And how many yes votes was that, Ms. Allen?
3.
All right, so it doesn't pass, so so the appeal fails, and the discipline committee.
Right.
Recommendation is what we're going with. All right. Adjournment, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening, everybody.
I'm
Thank you,
sorry.
Ms. Allen, for helping us out there at the end.